good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. In a lot of Christian culture commentary, there's a lot of discourse on divorce within the church. So much of it exists on the culture war. They either defend or dissent from church teaching. And as important as these discussions are, divorced Catholics often find themselves lost in the tussle because they are tokens in the dialogical back and forth. Philip Campbell has experienced this firsthand, and so he joins us. Philip is a history teacher for Homeschool Connections, author of many books on Catholic history, most notably the Story of Civilization series from 10 books. You can learn about his books and his classes on his website, which we will link in today's program. Philip resides in southern Michigan. Philip, great to speak with you, my friend. How are you?
Hey, Marcus. Nice to be back with you again.
Always great to reconnect with you. I agree with you. I think there are a few subsets within the church that often see neglect. They fall under the radar. I've noticed widows and widowers are one such subset. Couples struggling with infertility tend to be another. Divorced Catholics tend to be another. Just on a general perspective, can you comment on why you think that is?
Yeah, well, I think it's because of the intensity of culture war issues, as you said in your introduction. Often people who dissent from church teaching on sexual morality, divorce and remarriage is one of the flashpoints, right? They want the church to change its teaching on divorce and remarriage, and faithful Catholics oppose that, and they oppose it strongly. They stand for the traditional teaching that was delivered by Jesus Christ. And so because of the intensity on that, I think it hardens the lines to where the actual experience of divorced Catholics gets lost in the tussle, where I think people are afraid on the traditional side of extending us a certain degree of empathy or support, lest it be construed as supporting divorce itself. It's like there's not enough distinction between, hey, look, you can still offer support and counsel and friendship to divorced Catholics going through this situation without supporting, divorce itself. We seem to understand this when it comes to something like abortion, but I don't think this thinking has filtered into the subject of divorce quite so much.
Even the very word, I think, would jar the sensibilities of the people you would consider the everyday Catholic in the pew, especially those born and raised in the Catholic sphere, and the sacramental imagination is a wondrous thing, but could the catechesis on marriage and the family be one of the reasons why we tend not to even have a capacity for thinking about divorce as an issue within the church?
What do you mean, the catechesis on it?
The average Catholic is raised to understand the covenantal sacramental worldview of marriage and the family, and that's wonderful. They're raised with that imagination, and so the very notion of divorce is so foreign to their imagination. I just want to invite your comment on that.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and this is where you get into, I guess, the gap between what we teach and what we believe and what our ideals are, and then what often can happen on the ground, what can be really messy, and sometimes there's a little bit of dissonance when the messiness of real life collides with, as you call that sacramental imagination, which is very powerful, and it's good that it is. It's good that we hold those beliefs and those ideals, but they aren't always realized. Sometimes things happen and they're very tragic and destructive. And what my article is calling for is for people who approach this to not look at it as an ideological struggle first, but to look at kind of the human element and what people going through it need from their friends and parishioners.
Let's talk about exactly that there is a need of this community within the church that often flies under the radar, chief among which, beginning this part of the conversation, is that it's a private affair. There's a messiness to it, there's a pain and heartache to it, and so this isn't something that needs to be publicized.
Yeah, I think what actually prompted this article was I was talking to somebody in an online forum, and I just casually mentioned my status as being divorced, and a total stranger just responded and said, "Why'd you get divorced?" And I said, "Well, that's kind of private, sir, you know." And he said, "No, it's not. You brought it up, you know." And it, kind of like no propriety whatsoever in talking about it, you know, in bringing it up. And I think in general, it is very private. It's very difficult. And I think what tends to happen is people want to get into all they want those things aired out in a way. They want to hear the gossip, you know, and they want to be able to formulate an opinion. Whose side should I take, right? Do I support? Who's in the right and who's in the wrong, you know? And they've already started thinking about it in a polemical way. But what people actually need is support. Like, is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything I can help with you and the children? If there's children involved, do you want to come out with me and have, you know, and get a drink and have a talk? Like, we need social support and need companionship, you know, because it's a very isolating experience. And instead, what we often get is prying and nosiness and things like that, which is like the last thing that anybody in that situation wants.
Unfortunately, there's a tendency to seek out gossip and I think even those people, as well-meaning as they might be, they don't even realize that that's what they're engaging in. Could you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they are well-meaning. But there's kind of like a thoughtlessness or a callousness to it. Mm-hmm. They don't intend to be intentionally insulting, but because they haven't really gone through the experience, they don't understand what it's like. And a parallel I often give, Marcus, is a woman who has lost a child, like lost a pregnancy, right, to miscarriage, mm-hmm. and somebody says to them, "Well, don't worry, you can have another child." You know, they're not trying to be deliberately hurtful. But I think any woman who's had a miscarriage can tell you how hurtful that comment is, to just say, "Oh, don't, you know, it'll be okay. You can have another one in the future." So you get these people who will just say thoughtless things. And I think the issue is we really just as a society, we don't really know how to bear with people in their sufferings. We don't know how to console people. We don't know how to empathize. All we know how to do is like give platitudes that are not really well thought out.
And the other aspect to this is for the people who go through this unfortunate situation in their life, the last thing they want is to be a constant funnel for the pity of others. Yes.
That tends to happen as well. And it's been in my situation, it's been the better part of a decade. Things are very stable now, but I remember when I was going through this, there was a lot of pity. Every time that I wasn't feeling well, or every time that something was off, or anything was not exactly the way it should be, you know, someone would say, "Oh, I'm sure, this situation must be really hard on you," and this and that. And it's kind of like, okay, look, this, yes, divorce is hard, it's difficult, but it doesn't define my whole existence. It doesn't define my day-to-day life, and largely we just want to have some empathy and be treated like normal members of the community, right? Rather than just being constant objects of pity. And I remember, and I talk about this in the article, I remember when I was through with the process, everybody kept saying, like, "I'm so hard," this and that. And then I remember I went out for a drink somewhere, and asked me, how things were going, and I told him what had happened, and he said he congratulated me, and I was very put off by that. And he said, no, like, it's sad that he's sad that this happened, but he said there's a very difficult experience, and I'm just glad that it's over and that you made it through and that you're still here and that you seem to be doing well, And he said, so that deserves congratulations. And it was nice to get something from somebody that wasn't just pity.
Phil, thank you for joining us to share your experience. I know this isn't the easiest thing to do, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus.
My guest has been Philip Campbell, history teacher for Homeschool Connections, and he was sharing about the subset of the community of the church that has undergone divorce and the empathy and compassion that we as the body of Christ can show them. I'm Marcus Peter.